This next discussion is going to focus on the basic differences between stand-up and sit-down type forklifts. In most cases, they perform the same basic functions, but go about it with different operating characteristics. The first difference is obvious, and that is that you are always standing, so all the controls are incorporated in a joystick-type control. One key takeaway is that stand-up lifts are much more difficult to operate and may take hours, if not days, to master. Here is a typical joystick and steering control. This next clip shows another key difference. Watch the reach mechanism. This is why it's referred to as a reach truck, because it actually extends its carriage and forks to retrieve a pallet in a narrow aisle setup. Watch also how the operator uses his left hand to steer and the right on the joystick. And see how this lift can turn on a dime, yet another key difference. Moreover, a technique used to slow down or stop exclusively on electric-powered lifts is known as plugging or regenerative braking. This is when the lift travels in one direction and you move the controls to make it go in the opposite direction before you come to a complete stop. Lastly, avoid using the foot pedal as a brake. It's a parking brake only. Practice plugging to stop the lift.
Here are some key points about stand-up type lift trucks. Reach trucks, for example, have load-bearing outrigger legs which enable them to maneuver in extremely tight aisles, usually about 8.5 to 9 feet. But they do have certain limitations. Reach trucks are not to be taken up or down inclines, ramps, or into the back of trucks. Stand-up counterbalance lifts are somewhat more versatile in the sense that they can handle small inclines and can go in and out of the back of trucks, but achieves this in part by having a much wider frame. Therefore, they sacrifice some of that narrow aisle capability of a reach truck. This is a typical garden variety reach truck working in a narrow aisle warehouse. Notice that when the operator gets the forklift into position, he cannot drive right up to the face of the rack. He has to stay back a few feet because of the outrigger legs. This is where the reach mechanism comes into play. He does get the forklift as close as possible, then extends the reach mechanism out, retrieves the pallet, raises it just high enough to clear the beam, and then retracts the load back to the forklift. Notice that when the load is in the travel position, the load is kept above the outrigger legs. It's worth repeating that all reach trucks basically do the same thing. They raise, they lower, they reach out, they retract in, they side shift their loads, and they tilt. But depending on the manufacturer, they all go about it much differently. So we could talk about this all day in class, but ultimately you as a forklift operator have to get on this type of equipment and practice extensively, preferably in an open part of the facility away from coworkers and other products. Your hands-on instructor should test your knowledge of the truck's maneuverability characteristics and all its various hydraulic functions.
As you can see in this animation, an operator using a stand-up type lift truck is making two critical mistakes. He's taking a corner too quickly while trying to elevate a load at the same time. If this happens and you experience a lateral or forward tip-over situation, because you are standing and not restrained, simply step back out of and to the rear of your operator compartment and allow the lift truck to fall over.
Plugging, or regenerative braking, is a common way to slow or stop exclusively on electric-powered forklifts such as reach lifts, order pickers, and even pallet jacks. Stand-up type lifts do have a pedal that many confuse as a foot brake. It's not. It is often called a dead man brake, and for good reason. It is a parking brake only and works much like an on-off switch, meaning that when it's on, it is on 100%, and when it's off, it is off 100%. No middle ground. Because these lifts don't have traditional foot brakes, the right way to slow down or stop is to simply move the directional control in the opposite direction of where you are currently moving. As always, consult your operator manual for complete details on this feature.